Morning, morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Power Hour. Anyone want to share why we come here on a Wednesday at 10 when there's no free doubles to incentivize you? Yes.
Refresh myself and hear new ideas.
Hear new ideas, yes. Anybody else on this side who's down on their phone and might want to look up and share with me? Call out, hashtag call out. Okay, so what's that? To recharge, Ian, that's a challenge, right? You have an hour to recharge all these folks inside of here. So, I'm not going to be long. I don't even know how to introduce Ian. I know Ian for so many years. I think when I joined Massy in 2007 in head office, I met Ian there doing many things and mainly doing a lot of work with the foundation. I'll tell you how I know Ian. Um, Ian was the lead consultant who started a program called, or with a few other young men, who started a program called Boys to Men. And that's what I worked most closely with Ian on. And what we did is we went into communities and worked with young men to build them as leaders in their families, leaders in their communities. And it takes a very special person to walk that path for young men, especially when you're going into communities where people have experienced significant trauma. And I have an incredible amount of respect for Ian. Ian is also a psychologist. Is that the name? Well, he'll tell us it in the next hour. But also has done work internationally as well and locally, and has done some tremendous transformational work with people, and in particular, how I know him, the work that we have done with the Boys to Men program, but has also done a lot of work with individuals. So it's not just men, also women. And it is an honor. So Ian is not a celebrity like some of the folks that we've had here, but a transformational force and almost sort of one of Trinidad and Tobago's quiet national treasures because of the work that he has done very quietly and building others up who have really taken more of a front-facing role. But truly, the work has been done. Ian has really helped people make some choices in their lives that has transformed this country in many ways. So I think it's a pleasure here to have you. Ian, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. I know you've met some of our folks from the middle management team, like Sparkle and Varisha. And anybody here was on middle management as well with this team? Yeah, so you would have met Ian. And so Ian is no stranger, so I just want to introduce Ian, and of course, Kavi will also guide the conversations, right? Thank you.
All right, morning again, guys. Ian, thanks so much for doing the show. So welcome and welcome back to Massy Stores. I know you have not been here for a while, but thanks again for coming. I want to start off by saying a small joke that I told, I guess, twice already for the day, but it's important and spiraling off of what Candace said earlier, how I know Ian. I met Ian for the first time 15 years ago and met him last week Friday by chance. This is not only the third time I'm meeting Ian, but the reason why this is important is that 15 years ago I did the graduate training program, similar to the middle management program, I guess, but the entry level one. And Ian was one of the speakers. And we had probably about 10 speakers over 10 weeks or something like that. And Ian is the only guy that I remember out of the 10 speakers. The funny part is I don't know what he said. I can't remember what he said, but I do remember that Ian made some level of impact on me. So, Ian, thanks again for doing the show, and I'm looking forward to the conversation we're about to have.
I just want you to know I can't remember what I said either.
Well, as we said, as he told me here in his wisdom, I obviously internalized it and projected it into the world now. So I'm here because of Ian, let's say. I want to start off by saying that, or asking, employees show up to work in a new environment all the time with opportunity on their mind. They show up motivated, ready to do something. They come to this job for the first time when they take a job, excited about what the future holds. Most employees, at least. Somewhere along the journey, when they start, and during their time at that job, they may lose zeal, they may lose passion, may lose motivation. Why do you think that is?
Well, people come to work because they need the money, first and foremost. And it is once they've established that, like, okay, I'm getting a paycheck now, then they start looking around at the culture of the organization that they're in, or they have to respond to it, and then they realize there's a culture here that nobody told me about. And not only is there a culture here that nobody told me about, I can't seem to get into it. And what do I have to do to get into this? And that is where the sort of issues really start, because somebody either tucks them under the wing and say, let me show you. And, and they show them what they know, and they tell them all about the little idiosyncrasies in this culture here, and you have to watch this one, and you have to watch this one. So the persons who are conditioning them to the actual job and the tasks that they have to do, and not usually not the persons, the managers and all these people who are responsible, but the guy on the ground who says, let me tell you what's really going on here, and brings them under his or her wing. And I mean, before you know it, they themselves forget why they're here, and there's no recourse to anybody else to say what's going on. So they just go along a certain train until they come to a middle management program or something, where they hear something different, but they do not hear and understand the culture very clearly in terms of what you want to do here. And I don't know, quite frankly, I don't know if it's spoken often enough, because I'm not around that much, but it needs to be. You can't just assume when people come to work that they're here now and they will get into it and they will learn. And sometimes I'm afraid there's a lot of that, because I hear it from people who, talked about the Boys to Men program, and Massy Stores has been pretty good in hiring some of the guys, and they tell you that, They come and they come excited to do the job, and then they hear all of the little things going on, and no one is sort of pulling them aside and making it clear, like simple things like we have sort of values that we live by, and this is what we really want to do here, because at this level, all you've come here to do in their minds is to do the work and then go home. And I think that's a basic misread of young people when they come into work. People think that they just come in just to get the money, but they don't. They're looking for meaning sometimes in their jobs, and I don't know if you consciously do that, help them to understand the true meaning of what you're doing, so I think that's something that you really need to look at. Stop making the assumptions that people just come to get a job and they join up, because that when they say, let us begin like we intend to continue, and if you begin like, just find your own way, then that's how they continue, and then it's diagnosed as a problem somewhere down the road.
Yeah. So culture is a word that's thrown around quite often, especially in corporate environments. What is the organizational culture? Who is responsible for building culture? How do you create culture? How do you influence culture? It's something that people talk about, and they could define what is the organizational culture, but is there any prescribed way to influence that? How would you go about doing that if you had that task?
Well, I'm not as confident as you are when you say that people can define the culture, because what happens at the stage of introduction that I just pointed out happens throughout the organization. When you eat, even when you quote unquote move up, you know, it isn't, you learn a little bit more, but the sort of, let me tell you what's really going on, still, conversation still takes place. And there's nothing wrong with that conversation if it's authentic. But oftentimes it's not, let me put it this way, it's not as authentic as it possibly could be, you know. And I don't know much enough about your organization to know if how intent you are in making it clear that this is what we stand for, you know, and not in a sort of this is what we stand for. For people have a real understanding, so when they communicate it, it's a natural kind of a communication, you know. It's like almost like creating that kind of homesy feeling that people want to create in their place, you know, where we all in this together. And that's not, I mean, you cannot assume that that is going to happen without intervention, and oftentimes constant intervention. That goes beyond just doing the job, because you want them to do it, you want them to do the job with a certain kind of energy, a positive energy, because you're in the people business and people come in and they look for, they're actually looking for that, you know, and sometimes they find it and sometimes they don't, and you need that kind of consistency. So it has to be, well, in my opinion, it has to be a priority, but oftentimes it doesn't appear to be, based upon the feedback that you get. You know, it's get the job done, but not how you get the job done. And the how is not in terms of the technical part of it, but the, you know, the emotional part of it, you know, as well. Oftentimes that is not seen as an area of focus. Just do your job. And it works because people do their jobs, but they can hardly wait to get out of here. You know, and I think that's something that you could really pay some more attention to, quite frankly.
Could we just raise the mic volume on Ian's mic? Y'all, everybody's here, okay? All right.
You hearing what I'm saying? Yes. Okay. All right.
All right, good. So, you said there that people work primarily because of the paycheck.
Yep.
Is that a limiting factor, though? That if you show up for money, you really can't extract all the value that's out there in the world?
There's nothing wrong with showing up for the money, especially when you never had it before. I mean, this guy getting a regular paycheck, and it's guaranteed. That's a good stabilizing feeling, you know. But that's not all there is basically what I'm saying. I don't want you to misinterpret that, but that's not all there is, because you have a culture, and you mentioned just now, you know, what is this culture? And I should ask you, what's your culture? Because, you know, you decide what the culture of this place is going to be like. And culture is basically, this is how we live here, and we mean it, and these are our values, you know, and this is what we expect from you, and this is, most importantly, this is what you can expect from us, and not just the provision of the opportunity to make money, but how do I grow you, how do I develop you, even, and I'm not talking so much about promotion, just as a person, you know. I don't want to get up in the morning and say, oh gosh, work today. I want to get up and say, hey, I have some stuff to do, you know, and I'm sorry I have to leave, because if I don't go now, you know, like not like I am under pressure, but we don't get to do what we want to do as a team, or however you want to refer to it. But there has to be that energy, but there should be. And what you find sometimes, depending on the person who's in charge, it depends, that determines how much of that energy is there or not, and it really could be different. That this is what we as an organization do, and we expect it. We don't have to demand it, because everybody benefits from it. And, you know, grow people is what you need to do, I think. It's easy for me to say as I'm not dealing with what you're dealing with, but like, technically that's what it is. You know, people need to feel that there's something else happening here besides the work that I have to do.
Just now, I think we had a slight difference of opinion. So I said culture might be easily defined, and you said you weren't sure. I think where the commonality there, though, is that if we go around this room and we ask everybody, what is the organizational culture? I think everybody's going to have an answer. So it could be defined, but I think where the problem is that would it be universal? Probably not. Meaning that if we go around the room, everybody's going to have a different answer. How do you take personal, or do you agree that you have to take personal responsibility as an employee to be a part of the culture, to influence the culture, to affect culture, as well as the company itself has to take responsibility in shaping that culture? But it's not one-sided then. It's not the company is responsible for culture, and it's not that the people responsible for culture, but a blend of both. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't think that is this is an opinion. I don't think that's how it actually happens. I think that what used to happen in terms of management, especially management as it was, they would sit in a room somewhere isolated, and they will determine the culture. You know, like this is what it is, and you go out there and you pass it on to whoever else. You know, this is our culture, and you know, the impression that people get is fit in or else. You know, and there has been some shift where, you know, as you grow, you actually talk to people about what culture really means. Because, you know, it's not a conversation that is often held. So you really have to sit down and say, this is what we mean when we say our culture. This is what we expect. This is, and we're not trying to run your life, but we're saying that this is what we want, and this is what makes us work. And not just me telling you, but I want you to embrace it as well, so that we are a force. There's a time, some organization I know said, a force for good. You remember that? You all remember that? Okay, so, and that was a direct, concentrated way of saying, this is our culture. This is who we are. So whatever you do that's not for good, you know, if you sort of take it through all levels, whatever you do, if it's not for good, then you're not living the culture. So I could talk to you about the culture and what that means in terms of how you're living it, because you live a culture, you know, and once you establish that, everybody becomes a vehicle to maintain and sustain that culture. And if you don't believe me, try to stop the carnival. Carnival is culture. Remember, one year they didn't have it, and you had to have it because that's what we want. And that's the kind of thing that, challenging as it may seem as we sit and talk about it, but you really have to do, get people to see it, get your people who are building your business to see it like that, at whatever level they are at. So when people come into to your store, whoever they meet, they feel it, and they want to come back. And they literally want to come back because this is a place where I feel comfortable. You know, so it takes constant conversation though, and review. And oftentimes where it gets lost sometimes is that you get so busy you don't have the time to do that. And that's the first thing to fall off, because you need your results, right? So it's a it's a tough responsibility when you're under pressure to do your work, I know. But and by your work you know what I'm talking about. But you have to be conscious of the fact that you're operating out of a certain norm. This is what we do. And that's easier said than done. Which is why leadership becomes important. And how often you meet with your people and talk about what the culture is. You know, like the first thing that if there's some dysfunction in the culture, somebody's doing something that you really don't want them to do, you have this to relate it to. And so you're not the only person reinforcing it as a manager, but it becomes, this is who we are, and there's not a lot of that when people are left to their own devices, meaning that the explanations and the conversations, well, not so much the explanation, but the conversations are not taking place because nobody has time. Everybody's busy, right?
Yeah, we absolutely are.
Yeah.
I wanna go to a hypothetical situation. So, if I'm a young guy, I just started at Massy stores in an entry level job in one of these stores. I want to become successful, but I really don't know how. So I come to you and I ask you, Ian, how could I be successful in this large environment with 2,000 people, 24 stores? What do I need to do to become successful?
I want to know what you really feel that you have, that you need to share, because I can tell you, it's clear what you need to do to be successful. You have rules and regulations, but there are certain, are you in fact living out this culture? Do you understand what it means? The objective criteria, people know what that is. What needs to happen is the kind of relationships that we need to nurture. That even if I don't quote unquote move up, I'm good because I know where I am and I know how to expect. I know what to expect. I know how people respond to me, and I know it's not a punitive environment, and I know if there's something that is not happening that I think that you are not doing as a manager or whatever that is in alignment with the culture. I could tell you what I see without fear of being, put on the list. You got to watch that person, because oftentimes that's where your change initiative comes from, because somebody feels very strongly about something and they can articulate it, and the thing that you don't want to hear people saying is that, like, nobody listening to me. And you hear that. When you're hearing that, you know that's a become alert to something, and you know not what until you talk about it. And all of these, sometimes people feel that it appears as though they feel that, like, to talk about culture takes up too much time, non-productive time. Because it's not, you can't measure it. You can't measure what comes out of that. But you create the environment where you get the energy and people begin to say things, little things that could help in the larger picture, because they will tell you things that you don't normally see, especially as a manager. And not to whisper about anybody, but to say, we say we're doing this, but I'm not seeing this here. But anyhow, and this is what I'm seeing. The conversation goes up a level, and anybody can join. Sounds idealistic, but it's very possible if people really believe that if I say something, even if, and I don't have to be right all the time, but even if I'm not on course, then I get corrected. But it takes a certain kind of energy, especially the emotional energy. That people feel, I didn't sign up for that. But in fact, you should, I think, and that's just an opinion.
So that's a great segue into the emotional conversation and the emotional intelligence conversation. So if you're having a conversation with somebody and you become emotional, you lose power in that conversation. You give the power to the other person if you become emotional.
Are you suggesting that, or are you saying that's how it is?
Well, I'm putting that out there
Okay,
to hear your interpretation of that. I believe it. I believe that if we have in our conversation and I become emotional, I've given you leverage over me because now you could use that to manage me, however you want to manage me. One, do you agree with that? And if you do, how do you keep your emotional state intact to deal with difficult people and difficult conversations?
Yeah, well, if I feel if I bring my emotional state to you and it's seen like that, then what we have is a trust issue. And I'm saying, and I'm going out saying, well, I can't talk how I really feel here, and so the conversation ends there, but the responses don't end. They become internal and then they go off to the side, and you want it in a place where you can see it, and emotional in a it's almost classic. Emotional in a quote unquote business environment. It's like, don't bring your emotions into this. And I say, why not? Why not? I have them. What am I supposed to do? Leave them at the door when I come to work? This is how I really feel about this. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm saying if I feel about this, come and rub my back. But these are the emotions I have about, and we try not to admit it, but sometimes our concrete actions come out of a deep emotional state that we have been nurturing and we don't share, and people just say, well, she's like that or he's like that, so when they get like that, and that's not the kind of environment that allows people to express how they really feel. And even when they express how they really feel, I mean, at a management level, you could look at that and see how it relates to what you're doing. So it comes together. When you stop looking at that, though, then it's become purely business. What's the time? I actually heard an employee say one time, says, they don't care about how I feel. I'm not necessarily talking about here, but it could be here too. But they don't care how I feel. So if I am doing something and I'm working till 4 o'clock, and I'm putting the square there, and it's halfway in at 4 o'clock, I leave it there, and I'm continuing tomorrow morning. I'm not even going 1 minute. In other words, you're not giving me, I ain't giving you. And you can't tell me anything because it's business is business, right? We end at 4. Well, that's not in there because it was 4 o'clock and I didn't get it all in yet. And I know this may be tough for you to hear as an actual conversation, but it was an actual conversation. But that was a long time ago. But Massy is no longer like that. Now everybody is collaborating and talking nicely and all that now, right? But at that point in time, that was a genuine feeling. And quite frankly, I don't think it goes all the way away because people never forget that. You never forget that, So that's why you find sometimes when you come into situations like this, when you're talking about change and doing things differently, people sit down and they listen, and as soon as they step out of the room, they say, yeah, you hear that? Yeah, you know what? And the whole dialogue changes outside, and you don't want that because what you want it to be, when people leave, they say, that idea, what you think of that? You need that kind of energy instead. But unless you nurture the emotional part of it. No, I'm not saying rub everybody's back. But I mean, people know that. I mean, people know they come to work, but leaving your emotions at the door is a very difficult thing to do. It may even be an unreasonable request. What happens when it appears in your workplace? Well, that's what you need to talk about in terms of culture.
But nobody wants to leave emotions at the door. So, because that's what makes us human, to have emotions, and it's an important part of us. But I think there's a difference between emotions and being emotional. So if I had to challenge that a bit, I would say that where I was going with it is that we need to have emotions. It makes us human. Nobody wants to lock that away. But becoming emotional in a situation could lead to disruptiveness. Because we have lost control.
What I would say to you is that you've come here to do business, but I don't want you to be business-like. It's like, that's like emotions, but not emotional, or business, not business. There's nothing wrong with being emotional if it's in the context that, like, I understand they're being, and I know I'm being emotional, and you know I'm being emotional, and we could talk about that, and we can deal with that. But, you know, to not have it means you suppress it and take it where, you know? It has to come out. That's the nature of emotion, you know? Go and you lock the door, say, I need to go to the washroom, and you're going to cry, or something, or I need to make a call, and you say, it happened again, you know? And I mean, and I'm not talking about creating some kind of an ideal state where I mean, everybody gets together around the campfire and say, kumbaya. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about understanding that it's a part of a person's, that's what people bring to work, and they can't leave it at the door. And I don't think anybody comes to be emotional. It's a part of being human, I think. And to say that you can't have that, I don't know. Then you leave it to me as to how I deal with it. And I don't have to tell you, but I could go whisper to somebody, you know, and that is what you don't want. But by not acknowledging it, interestingly enough, you are allowing people to say, well, if you have the emotions, take it somewhere else, and you don't know where it goes. That's all I'm saying. I'm not, you know, it's, what's wrong with being emotional? I get emotional sometimes. You know, and you say, what the hell's going on here, man? What's wrong with that? But then you step back and you say, okay, let's look at this. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a sign of weakness.
But I think you said just now that it's about nurturing your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
When you take a step back, is that nurturing your emotions to have some level of reflectiveness to progress in a powerful manner then? Is that the key or the trick in moving this to a constructive way forward?
I'm saying if it's a safe space where I can say, listen, this is how I really feel about that. And I acknowledge, say, I understand how you feel about that. And this is how I understand how you feel about that. Then there's an acknowledgement that you're still here with me and I'm still here with you. But to say we have no time for that is a different response. You know, you can be emotional about something and I could say, I understand that. And I feel that. However, here's where we are. But to say, well, you know, we have no time for that is a different response. That's all I'm saying. You know, and being emotional sometimes is real life. And real life doesn't stop at the door. Now, I'm not promoting it. Everybody in here get emotional all of a sudden and start crying, you know, for all sorts of things. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying from a very non-emotional standpoint, actually, that like I acknowledge your emotion. I know how you feel. You know, and here's what we need to do.
So you said something earlier, and I think it's powerful. I want to come back to it. It's a people business.
It is.
Especially our business is a people business. We have 2,000 employees. We see 30 to 40,000 people a day. Is a people business, as you said, and people have emotions. What you said just now, that I think is important. The duty to create safe spaces.
Yeah.
And I think we as employees, all employees, whether employees, management, leaders, informal leaders, it doesn't matter. We all have a duty to create safe spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do. You know, I mean, you can actually make something out of it. You know, like there's the safe space. If you want a safe space, that's where the safe space is. So we acknowledge the fact you're emotional and all that, but you know, don't let it stay with you all day. And if it's staying with you all day, let's just talk for a minute and see how we can get around this. But like to just say, well, just do your work, which you can do because you're being paid to do your work. You know, it's people see it as especially leaders and managers sometimes see it as an extra. Why should I sit down and listen to your story? You want to hear mine? I have my stories too, you know. That's usually the response that you get, you know. You think I'm not like that, but look at me. That's one response. But another response is I acknowledge that, but like, you know, let's talk about that after. And then do talk about it after. You know? Because it's a trust issue. And it becomes that after a while. Especially if afterwards you're going to tell everybody, you know what this person was really worried about? They would say, oh, could you imagine? You know, it's a trust issue. You're not taking me seriously. So you know what? I ain't putting all that energy that I used to put into what I'm doing anymore. If that's how you feel, well, let me tell you how I feel.
But to avoid that, and if we break it back down to, or we go back to the unwritten contract between employer and employee. So I know there's a written contract, obviously, but the unwritten one, there I say is, I'm coming to do a job, as you said, because I need the money.
Yeah.
So let's put that out there. I need the money is important. That's the reason why I'm showing up.
That's not the only reason. I'm looking for promotion too.
Well, is a primary reason for showing up. But the unwritten part of this is that I am looking for growth. I am looking for opportunity. I'm looking to be nurtured, in a sense. And that is what I want as part of the unwritten contract. I want a paycheck, and I want an opportunity to grow, learn, and develop. On the employer side, we expect, or they expect, a service to be done as we agreed for the amount that we are paying you. Where in that contract do things fall down? The employer or the employee, is it a bit of both? And if it falls down, to avoid the situation of, well, it's 4 o'clock and I need to leave. How do we avoid that situation of working like that and making sure that we fulfill the employer-employee contract? What do managers need to do? What do leaders need to do? And what does the employee need to do?
Well, I would ask you a question that comes to mind. Do you really care when people come and tell you they have this thing that this is what really, but do you really care to listen to that? And I mean, that's for everybody here. Do you really care to listen to that? Or do you say to yourself, oh my God, what does that have to do with anything? You know, because that's where the dialogue either begins or it ends. Because when I come with that, and being highly emotional also means you're very observant, right? And you're seeing everything. And you hear it sometimes, especially with the in terms of style analysis, the sympathetic style type of person who really understands what it means to feel how for people. Listen, I talk to them. I don't know if you hear anything in the mic. I stop hearing myself. But I talk and they only pretend to listen. They don't really care here. And there's nothing wrong with caring. Caring doesn't mean you can't do your work. And it doesn't mean that you're not businesslike. It means that you put everything in a context and it is meaningful. That's all it really means. People know that you can't spend whole day talking to them. They know that. But it's an acknowledgement. And sometimes if you see it without their having to say it, that makes it even more powerful. That means that you notice something and you really care about me. And that goes a long way. And that doesn't mean I have to spend whole day looking at you. It's I'm not taking away from the business, Because after I leave this feeling, I say to myself, okay, get yourself together because you got to do this. Because I know I'm a part of something larger here. And that consciousness is and that's what I'm talking about when you say you don't want people to lose that. Because when you lose that, it's hard to come back. Because it makes it really challenging. Because it becomes them and us. And not, this is what we provide for people to come for our services. And that consciousness, I think, is not prevalent enough because everybody's busy, especially take it to another level. I've been out for a little while, so Trinidad and Tobago has changed considerably. Not only is there, I really looking out for me, but how you feel, you want to know how I feel? If I tell you how I feel, you talk about your feelings, let me tell you my feelings. It comes across to the person on the other end of it as uncaring, because I don't want to take up a whole day. I know I'm in a business, because if it gets to a point where it goes beyond that, then we have to have a different kind of conversation as to, okay, what are we doing here? But that shouldn't be shouldn't be. If that is the first place that you go, because we don't have time for that here, then okay, you don't have time for that. Well, let me see if I have time to come to work tomorrow on time.
But to me, Ian, it's something is beautifully simple in what you say. It's a people business.
That's right.
And we need to care.
Yeah.
So just do that.
And I'm also saying it doesn't make you a counselor. It makes you acknowledge that this is how you really feel, and I know that. And if there's a place inside me where I could feel, where you feel, I could say, yeah, I know what that feels like. Believe it or not, but we'll talk about that a little later. But right now, let's do this. And let's talk about it later. And we can't talk about it too long because I have my own business to talk about. At least acknowledge that you are here. And it's not always easy. And yes, we know that, but like I bring that to work with me, and I don't want you to be like that all day. You ever work with anybody who all day is down? What does that feel like? It's entirely different when you pass over someone say, everything okay now? Yeah, now you feel it. Then there's an energy, and it doesn't take much, but it's not businesslike.
So, going back to that example there, I mean, if you work with somebody who is always down, there's a point where they could start drawing energy from the environment as well.
Yeah, but you have EAP, don't you?
Yeah, well, you would know well. But my question to this is, many people, all of us, we have all been demotivated in life. We have all felt challenged in life. We have all come about problems that felt insurmountable. What advice do you have for people in dealing with challenging situations where you feel demotivated, and how to come out of that? Where would you start with that?
Well, what I heard you say just now about everybody, you're basically saying everybody's been through that. So I am taking that and I'm turning that into empathy. I can empathize. When you genuinely empathize, and you can empathize, people feel that. I mean, because it's genuine. And so you don't even have at that point in time, most of the time when people are going through that, they just want to know that somebody understands it and feels it. So if you're saying, and I think that's what you just said, I've been there too, and I can empathize with that, and you're no longer in that place. It doesn't mean like, I'm no longer in that place, so why don't you come up? But you empathize with people where they are. That's what empathy means. I meet you where you are, and I know that's where you are, and I understand that's where you are, but there's a way that we could work through this, but we need the work done now. And follow up. What What really causes the problem is the lack of follow-up. Because at the end of the day, yeah, I know we said that, but I really got to go. And maybe you really have to go, but there needs to be some kind of an understanding that you didn't just say that to manipulate me. You work in a diverse environment. There are emotional people in this room who are sitting down here and then saying, finally somebody says it. And there are other persons saying, yeah, I don't have no time for that. It's a very real thing that you have to do. And if you've been through it before, which is how I'm reading what you just said, then it shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't be like, I did it, so therefore you do it. If I can do it, then you can do it, which is what people often say. Don't worry, that's going to work. That too will come to pass. Yeah, but I'm in it now. So how does that help me? And sometimes you can say the same thing, it will come to pass, but from an empathetic point of view, when you say that, say, okay, I could see that. But we don't have time. And I'm suggesting to you, you're not going to like this, make the time. 5 minutes, man. Because we really can't spend a whole day talking about your problem. And that's a fact. But you can acknowledge it. And that gives me a sense of belonging. Or it would certainly go in that direction. And I'm not alone. You mean you've been through here? Really? It doesn't end? And so it's a people really think it takes a lot, but it really doesn't. It really doesn't. Because if you truly understand, you will know that it doesn't. But you have to. The cost of not paying attention to it may be more than you think. That's what I'm saying. So I'm sure you've had the experience where in some stores it's really different from other stores. And what's the difference? Somebody in the one that's doing it different actually listens, or people feel that they listen. And in the other one, I can't talk to this person, and they're not talking back to me. And that leaves me in the hands of who was ever in the back room with me. That's who I listen to.
Yeah, so empathy is a powerful concept, and I wanna go back to it though. So we are colleagues. Let's assume, right? We are colleagues, and you are in a demotivated state, not a great place. I am fine. We have any conversation. I try to empathize with you to help you through the tough time. That, for me, that is what I can do for you. My question now is, what could you do for yourself?
Well, the interesting thing about empathy when you empathize is that the persons with whom you empathize, especially if they see you as being, in charge of yourself now, and accomplished, they factor that into to how they feel. So you were here once, and you still understand, and this is where you are now. So there's built into that is a role model kind of situation, if you want to develop it, or sometimes you just want to say it, that's information that people can take for themselves. That like, hey, there's a way out of this. Maybe I don't know how, and maybe they may do something one day and come to you and say, I did so and so, what do you think of that? And you don't just say, yes, right? But it doesn't take as much, it doesn't take as much energy as you think to put somebody back in a space where they feel in charge of themselves. It really doesn't take a lot of energy to do that, because where you might think that if I start this conversation I wouldn't get my work done. It doesn't have to be like that. But I understand people feeling that, because there's some people who just seem as they can't come out of it, and that may call for a different kind of conversation at some point. And that's why you have EAP. I mean, and I say that not facetiously, I say that really, because when people come into that situation, they get a chance to talk and they know that you sent them there to get some help. And if they get some help from it, then they come back with energy. I don't think people see EAP in that way, but that's what it is. So it's not as because if you have someone coming to work emotionally all the time, down and feeling that they get no support, you will know it in the results. You will know it in the performance.
So you talk about EAP, but isn't there a recognition and acceptance as well to say that I need help and I'm going to find help?
Yes, there is. There is a responsibility because, it's an adult responsibility. I need some help. And people do say that. But if they're in an environment where they think that people don't, quote unquote, I hear it so often, don't care, then they don't say it. So in a caring environment, you will hear it. In an environment where they think it's uncaring, you won't hear it. But it impacts the output in their work. Is that right? You feel that? I hear. Okay.
During this conversation, I think I was telling you earlier, Ian, we were talking about some simple things that matter. And hearing some of this, we talk about empathy, we talk about listening, we talk about caring. The simple things done right will set businesses up, will set people up for a lot of success in life. And the parallel I draw for that is I tell the team all the time, all we do is we sell groceries. It's a simple business, it's a hard business, but if you do the simple things right, and you take care of people, which comes back to the conversation about it's a people business, we all will be successful.
Yep. You're not going to get any argument from me here with that, because when, I'm going to let out my big secret. Anytime I step into a Massy store, I stand up at the door. And I look to the left and I look to the right, and I can tell what's happening in here. And I'm not the only person who does that. And you ask somebody for some support or something, and they treat you with you. It's different from somebody saying, and people take note of that. And if I go to some other place and I get something different, I say, because people make decisions based on that, and you may not think it hits your your bottom line, but it does. It does.
Well, it absolutely does, right? We are in a service business, and we are serving people. So I agree, it definitely hits the bottom line if we don't serve in the right manner.
And you know where there's trouble in the Massy stores. Or any store you're going to, you know where there's trouble. Somebody talks to somebody in a certain way, and you see the response, you say, uh-oh. And some people go about their business oblivious to that, but sometimes some people look at that and they want more, and that's what you want, isn't it? That's how you get it. That's how you get it.
Yeah, so I think at this point in time, I want to ask the audience for questions. We reached that part of the segment, so we usually do this. Just put up your hand and our mic is going to flow right to you. We have one starting off here, second row. Brent.
Thanks for being here. You said, going back to culture, we have 24 locations and we have our head office, which is not a store, but we work here. And when I visit each location, I can pick up different cultures at each location.
Mm-hmm.
Should we, or even can we, change the culture of those locations to be more or less the same? Is it something we should try to do? Because it makes it easier for us to implement our programs. But is it something that we should try to do, or even can do, make those cultures more like each other? Or should we just allow them to flourish how they are?
Well, you have stores in different communities, and sometimes communities, different communities determine what it is they want to see. But as far as your culture is concerned, I don't know why you should have one culture in one store and another culture in another store, because this is Massy stores and this is what you stand for. Like, this is what you do. I mean, like, you have the same set of values, you have the same vision, I mean, you talk like this and you know what needs to happen. So when you have different cultures in different stores, that should be like what's this? And not in a negative way, but really and truly, what is happening here that shouldn't be happening, or what is not happening that should be happening? And I mean, and that's a quote unquote serious conversation, because somebody is saying something about something and you don't know what it is. And if you don't ask and just accept, well, this store is in I don't know, I'm afraid to say anything here, but like Woodbrook, and this next one is in Digomat, and the other one is in wherever, and you accept that, then you have a problem, because somebody's not talking to somebody about something, and I know not what, because then I don't know what the true culture is, and I don't know how it manifests, or even if it manifests, and that. Once you start getting that spreads like wildfire, like even the good employees start to say, you know what, why am I doing this? When I know that, so it's and that is a real issue. That's a real challenge that you have, because Massy stores in different communities, you deal with different kinds of people with different outlooks on life, and when the outlooks are different, you do have to respond to that, because that's your constituency, So these conversations need to happen often, is what I'm saying, because the people who are in different communities could sit here and say, yeah, that's easy for you to say, but not say it. But they need to be able to say that. And that's a challenge about culture. That's a challenge about culture.
But wouldn't the distance cause the difference in culture? Like, for example, Point Fortin would be different from the stores in Port of Spain or in Arima. Wouldn't that be an aspect of it not being a bad thing? It's just that's how it is?
I mean, you're in different communities, yeah. But I mean, in terms of the values, you have the same values, and you have the same vision, and you talk about how to get there, and you have a common understanding as to how to get there, and you can't not do it here because these people, whatever, that's what you stand for, and. Interestingly enough, people come to expect that once they know that it's there. And the first time they don't see it, they will let you know. In some communities, they'll let you know. In other communities, they won't. They will let him know. Because yes, communities are different, but your culture is real, and you have to manifest that, And if you're changing the culture, people don't change culture just like that. It takes conversations like this. Well, it's not a conversation yet, but it takes understandings like this. Common understanding, this is what we do. So it distinguishes you from other places, which is what you want, is it? So it's not because you're in a different community means you have to treat people differently. You know, your values are the same, you know. And there's no compromise on that, because that's what you've told everybody that's what you stand for.
Hi, Ian. I have a question. Organizations have evolved over my work career, and even in Massy, we have introduced into our values emotions, things like love and care, that would not have been in a value system when I was entering the work world.
No.
Employees have also changed, and the younger people seem to have a different balance in their minds between what is important to them from a recreational standpoint or a life standpoint and what is important in terms of work. How do we as leaders evolve, and how do we as employees evolve as things around us change?
You know, coming to that love and care thing, I just want to talk about that a little bit. You remember when love and care first came on the table? Well, okay, I used to see it from a perspective. You would go into rooms when the doors are closed, and you heard what people would be saying. You would hear what people would be saying about love and care. I mean, love and care with expletives. You know, what love and care you're talking about? This is a business, you know, and that's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. That means that, like, you've upset somebody's cart. But that doesn't mean because the cart is upset, meaning that you leave it alone. You've got to put things back in place. It takes a little more energy and a little more work to do that. But the thing about love and care is that love and care is valued anywhere you go. And to say, well, we're not showing any love and care here because in this community there isn't love and care is, I don't think you have that choice, do you? You know, and what's interesting about that too is once you start doing that, people come to accept it in every community. And if you stop doing it, then it creates more problems for you in the long term. You know, so it means that you got to talk to your people all the time. Yeah, and I dare say remind them, because some of the persons who were in those first meetings when love and care came to the table, I hear them talking about love and care now when people are, and I'm saying, is this the same person? Because after a while, and that's culture. That's what culture does. You know, you bring it no matter what, because this is how we live. And the fact that, like, people around here not accustomed to that word, that's not your problem. That's not your problem. Because after a while, they too become used to it and understanding it that it's different. Because, you see, nobody cared before. So they didn't know but you had to care. You know? And when they do, they hold you accountable. All kinds of different words. They look and say, love and care. You know, and that's accountability. It's not looking down or complaining. And how do you share that? By doing this, you share it here. But there's also a sort of a one-on-one thing that has to happen, small group thing that has to happen. It doesn't have to happen, you know, it can happen spontaneously because it's a part of your lifestyle. You know, you don't have to have a love and care meeting because we're doing it all the time. And if we are not doing it all the time, then we can have something to say, what is this? Because this is what we stand for. And I think it's, a lot of the time it doesn't happen because you're too busy. You think you're too busy. And you've got to make the time. If you're going to make it work, you could leave it and let it go. But if you're going to make it work, it's going to take some work. How do you make people love and care? Do you all love and care? You don't have to answer that openly, but like, really and truly. Do you? And you got to ask yourself that question. Really, you know, because when you're talking to somebody about love and care and you don't believe it yourself, you know, human beings have sensors. So, yeah, all right, you're saying that, you know, holding the party line, but I know that you know that this is not going to work. And you got to bring that to the table. And I've seen it brought to the table here, so I don't know if it's just not, don't bring it to the table anymore. And it's tough work, I know, but it pays off. Doesn't it?
Or could I be daring and say that support, which is a form of care, doesn't always look like how you want it to look sometimes, though, right?
Me personally, or just one?
No, I'm just saying in general, right? Sometimes support is not, it does not always look like how you want it to look.
Well, you talk about that. I mean, when you close your doors and you're having your conversation, they have to be real, truthful. When somebody comes with some off-the-wall statement, you don't say, what's wrong with that? You say, you deal with it. But when you leave there, you have a common understanding and a common expectation. And that's where the challenge is. Because you can't leave that and everybody go do their own thing. But you can't indoctrinate either. It's a constant conversation. It's constant work. And that's how culture changes.
I guess the mechanism again for that is the safe space environment. Being able to create a safe space where you could have those conversations.
It has to be safe. Because if I'm in there and I tell you something that you're not comfortable with, and you take that out of the room with you and find an opportunity to, then it's not working. And is that an ideal state I'm talking about? No, it's not ideal. We can disagree. But what are we going to do when we go out here? Not you go your way and I go my way. And that's a leadership issue, I think. If we're in a situation that I totally don't agree with you, but I feel as though we're not going to get out of this room unless I say yes, then when we go out there, that almost triggers mistrust or distrust. Because we all said yes in there, and I see you doing something there that's not saying yes, and nothing is happening. So it's business as usual. The thing about truth conversations is that people are going to say things that you don't like, and they're going to say things that they strongly disagree with. But there has to be an understanding that this is who we are. Oftentimes, it's almost like permission is given for not only for someone to disagree, but because I disagree, not have to do it. And there are no consequences for that. By consequences, I don't mean the usual consequences you put people, but no one seems to say, what are you doing? Did we not do this? And it's back to the drawing board. It takes work to build trust. You know what I'm saying? Because oftentimes when people have trouble with trust, it doesn't necessarily mean that started or it's going to end on the job. That is a cultural thing that you probably, the place I come from, you don't trust anybody. And if you trust somebody, sometimes you leave home and people tell you, don't trust anybody outside there, it's advice, and it's sound advice. And you have to acknowledge that. It's almost as though you're creating, which is what a lot of stores started to do after a while, businesses, a culture of our own. In here, this is who we are. So I don't care what you like outside, but in here, this is what it is. You can trust me in here. And even that doesn't work. There's a lot of, it calls for a lot of truth conversations. And not compromise, I don't agree with that, but I'm going to give it 100% shot. As long as I could come back and say, here's what it is. So the session may end, but the dialogue continues. So even while we're doing whatever we're doing and we're seeing it, I could say, hey, I'm not seeing this, and that's a dialogue that we're going to take back into the room later on to talk about trust. Because trust is not easy to come by. We've all had advice. Don't trust anybody outside there, okay? Especially those who come like this, and those who come like this, everybody comes in with that kind of understanding. And it puts you in a place where if you're going to talk about trust, then in here, this is what we mean. And this is not only what we mean, this is what we expect. It's okay to mistrust. As long as I could say to you, I'm not trusting what you're saying, you know. Here's why. Because that's often missed. By the time you say, I'm not trusting what you're saying, people go off into a tangent. But like, this is where the emotional part has to be managed. It's not I don't trust you, you know. I'm not trusting what you're saying, because here's why. And I could talk about what I see as the outcomes of what you're saying. And it doesn't have to do with you. It's a subtle difference. But it has to do with us and how we want to do our business and how we want to work as a team. Because you can't work on it. I mean, if you have a team and the level of mistrust is high, then like, I could say, you're really pretending. And once people see you're pretending, then everybody say, oh, just like I told you, and the guy who's running the show or the person who's running the show say, see what I tell you? Well, you went to that, but look at me. I sit in the same place, so come back onto me where I could run the show. And there is that. And that's very real, and there's nothing good or bad about that. That's just that's a reality. And you have to understand that, you know. There's a definition of trust or a statement on trust that I don't know if anybody's been through the program. I shared with people. You should read it again, you know, because like, I mean, I trust you, but I could tell you, I trust what you're saying, you know, but I ain't feel that's the right thing. And I will go out and work with that. So if it come back and it's not the right thing, we can talk about that. And that is a trust environment. So it's not you and I, it's what we are creating here as a company, as a team, which means I live that life as a person. And that's a great demand, because Trinidad and Tobago has changed a little bit, you know. And it's wise to tell people don't trust anybody out there. But not for you in here. Do you feel like that's creating a whole different kind of environment in here? Like Massy stores, a country by itself, where I could trust in here, but I can't trust outside? No. You can talk about that too. But there needs to be the openness about how you really feel about things and come out with a consensus, which is why in those sessions we talk about consensus. How do you come to that? And consensus doesn't mean that you agree with everything, but it says, okay, I'm going to do that because this is what we are doing. And that's not an ideal state, because it's very attainable. If we trust each other. And there are certain other things you can do, you know, all right. Let's do that. Let's give it 3 months, or let's give it 3 weeks and see how it works, and let's come back and talk about it. So it means that even those who don't trust it will exercise, and they might come back, and once there's truth, they say, I agree with this, but this, and you work things out together. You know, people look at the so-called soft side of the business. Sometimes the soft side of your business is more work than the other side, you know. But that soft side is what makes teams work. That understanding makes teams work. And I can hear all the hard and fast people in here saying, yeah, right, just do your job. That's what you need to do. But that's not enough anymore. It really isn't.
Right.
Hey, good morning.
Nice.
So, in speaking about expressing emotions and having that safe space, etc., Kavi asked about how you can help yourself.
How you can?
Help yourself. And you spoke a bit about needing to speak up and maybe seek out that help in a different space.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have any, I guess, practical advice to people who may have a harder time compartmentalizing? So, you might be emotional about a situation at work, but that might be exacerbated by something that's happening outside of work. And I think some people might be better able to manage that and others not so much. And from an employee's standpoint, that could make you less efficient, not be able to do your job. And if it's coming from a manager, that might create an unstable environment because people would feel the effects and they come in not knowing what to expect. And I also think that sometimes people might not be cognizant of it, of how that is affecting them and their workspace. So not leaving the emotions at the door, as you said, but also not dragging the baggage through the door with you. Can you speak to that?
Well, I would come from the place that says, if this is how we agree that we are going to live our lives, there's no baggage involved in that at all, everything then that impacts upon what we've decided is fair conversation, and not F-E-A-R, F-A-I-R, right? It's fair conversation, but I mean, we human, we have had our own experiences, right? And you talk to many persons afterwards, like I have done that, and so well, you and I had a conversation, we talked about this, and you didn't raise it in there, and there's always a good reason why I didn't raise it in there. And it comes back to trust again, like how do you trust? You trust. And if you see something that is not in alignment with that trust, you trust the system and the process enough to say it, and it's not personal because it's something that we have decided. Now the fact that I come from an environment outside where I can't afford to trust persons, I can't do anything about that, and you can't do anything about that. But we're talking about this within the context of your business, and in your business, this is what you do. And that's a commitment, which is technically one of your values. We are committed to what we do here. But this is a commitment, and so the safe space becomes like, that thing you told me about last week? I am so sorry. That makes absolutely no sense to me at all. And I think it's a bunch of nonsense, and we shouldn't follow that. Am I going to take that personally? I can. But I can say, why do you say that? And then we become objective. Why you say that? Because yes, you may say it in an emotional way, but you have to bring that to the table. But oftentimes when we hear the emotional part, people respond to that. And this is where leadership comes in. Somebody's got to say, hold on a minute, here's what we're doing here. And that's teamwork. You can't talk about that in isolation. That's why it's a whole package. So anytime you go through that, how many weeks? 15 weeks, half a year, going through whatever training program, middle management or just Massy stores management, saying we go through this, is to create an environment where you can speak freely. Because if you can't speak freely within this environment here, then what are you doing here? I mean, that's a real question. Is it that you don't trust? And if you don't trust, well, say so. Say, I really don't trust what you're saying. It may not necessarily be trusting you. I don't trust what you, because, those sorts of conversations sound almost like idealistic, but they're not. It's not idealistic. And if you were to do it, you will see how well it works. Because it really is not personal. We are running a business. And this is what we are doing. We're doing everything to make our business be the best business that there is in this whole country, throughout the region. Because that's your vision. you know, people come up with vision statements. Sometimes you go into places and you look behind the wall and you see them saying, integrity and commitment and fairness, and people look up at you and say, basically where you're at. I mean, but you're not doing that because you're living what you talk about. And that's why you really need to bring all the things that you keep hidden to the table so everybody can see it as far as the business is concerned. Is that idealistic? You may look at it like that if it never happened before, but in reality, it's not idealism. That's how you achieve it. That's how you make it your reality. At some point in time, it was your vision, and now by living it, you're making it your reality. That's how visions become reality. And if somebody's not doing it, you don't put them down, you support them. And say, hey, when you're doing that, this is not what we're doing. And they say, yeah, well, thank you. When they start saying thank you for pointing it out, instead of you're trying to put me down. I mean, the cultures before said that. You're trying to put me down. But what you're saying now is that you don't want that anymore. And if you don't want that, it's not going to just happen. You have to create it. It calls for some risks. So, Mr. Pandey, I don't agree with you at all, and I'll tell you why. That doesn't mean you're putting him down. That means if he's got to say at that point in time, okay, well, what? I got to factor that in because here it is. So when we are talking about all of these things, it's not unusual for after this people say, well, that's easy for him to say because he don't work here. People can say that. Or you can say, we have work to do. And that's the choice that you have to make because you do have work to do. We all are works in progress. What do you think of that? You think you could do that? No. I always come to this point where I say, really and truly. So we sit down here talking and it's I hope it makes sense because everybody's talking sensibly. But can you do it? And are you willing to do it? Answer that question. Just give the mic to somebody who can answer that question, please. Are you willing to do it? Who's going to take the mic and answer that? Nobody? Because if it's nobody, then that means that everybody can do it and you could just point to a person. Point to whoever you think. Are you willing to do that? Because
Brianna has the mic.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
Pardon?
Yes, we are willing.
I'm not hearing you though.
Yes, we are willing to do.
Oh. So what's in the way of you doing it now? Anything? Good. So now you know what to expect. And if you don't see what you expect, you trust enough to say, I'm hearing you saying that, but I'm not seeing you doing that. And when you hear somebody say that, the response is not like, what are you trying to do to me? It's like, help me. What am I not doing, in your opinion? And that's how conversations start. Non-judgmental conversations. Because if I'm doing it, I say, yeah, I do that. I'll tell you why though. And we have conversations about it. There's no fixed kind of, like this is not kindergarten. It's bright adults working together to achieve something.
So I know we have some questions also online, so I'm going to just ask Rihanna.
Just a quick question. So I've been following this new school of thought where it's considered that work-life balance is actually a myth, that life is but a series of priorities and trade-offs. What are your thoughts about that in terms of employees' mental health and well-being?
Work-life balance is a myth?
Yes.
What is work-life balance anyway? And what is mythical about that? What is meant by work-life balance? That's a genuine question for me, because I don't understand work-life balance. Because does that mean I'm always working when I'm thinking about things, and real life is not being lived? Or am I living real life and not worrying about work? What is work-life balance? When I leave work, I'm a different person, and I have a right to be that person, and I don't take home work with me. I've always struggled with work-life balance. And this is a personal level, because to me, if I'm sitting down and something comes to mind about, hey, you know what I didn't say at Massy stores is this, and that was important to say. How could I do it? Does that mean I don't have any work-life balance? In the middle of life, work comes to mind? And that's a genuine question, work-life balance. Because I know, and don't get me wrong, I know the phrase, but I never understood what it meant. My understanding of it is that, like, when I leave work, I'm a different person. Yeah, and I could shut down work. Well, so work-life balance is a myth.
I think really it's about not letting, like, your personal life suffer because you're working too much, or not letting your work life suffer because you're too much into the personal aspect. So being able to balance those two.
Okay. And I guess I have a different point of view, which is why I'm challenged with this, because I do what I do, and there are times when I say, you know what, I'm going to just put that to rest and do this other thing that I do, and I don't know what it means to balance that, because I'm an authentic person, I would like to think, and if I'm not, then we could talk about that. But if I'm demonstrating what is not balance, I really don't know what that is. Now, I understand what it used to mean historically. It means that, like, I do a job at your store, and as I leave that, it's done, and I could be the person that I truly am, because in here, I have to pretend a little bit because I'm not like that. And I think that to me has always been, I guess, has always been a kind of a myth here, because, like, I don't think people just leave the work behind, or when they come to work, leave their home behind. How many you gonna make calls afterwards? Say, did you do this? Did you do that? Did that happen? How many times? It's being clear that when you're here, there are certain expectations at work, and that's my quote-unquote job, but even job, things have changed, It really has, and it's recognizing the fact that, like, it's all integrated. That's your life, man. And it doesn't mean that you're at the beach and you're thinking about what did Mr. Pandey say we should do. It doesn't mean that, but it certainly means that, like, it's not alien to think, oh, shucks, I need to do that. But anyhow, Monday morning, this is Saturday. So I'm struggling with work-life balance now. I knew what it was before. Leave work and you leave everything behind. I don't think it's that simple now, because you got your phone with you, right? And people could call any time, right? Or if they say, oh, no, I wouldn't call you because I know, but I'll message you in such a way, and I'll know that you received it. And I wouldn't hold you accountable because I know that was on your own time, but that's what we're talking about today. Did you think about it at all over the weekend? Maybe you did, maybe not. Say not. it's a different kind of a culture, I think. Work balance, that's just how I see it. Do you agree with that? I mean, you know, I would love to hear what you think.
Hi, Ian. So I have a couple questions that came in online. The first one is that we've spoken a lot about emotional intelligence. If you had to summarize what emotional intelligence actually is and means, what would you say?
I know what I feel, I know why I feel it, and I know how to manage it if I have to manage it. I know how to express it if I have to express it. And if I decide to keep it to myself at this point in time, I have good reason for doing so, and that is my good reason that I could keep to myself unless you ask me, and I decide if I'll tell you.
Okay. And I guess part B to that question is, how do individuals assess their own personal emotional intelligence? My office hours are, but I say that only to say that, like, I mean, I can't just answer that unless I give a general, a broad point of view, you know, because, like, each person is an individual. And the fact of that like we are individuals, yes, there are certain things common about us, but when you're talking about emotions, I could feel a certain emotion, be comfortable with it, and you feel the same emotion and you're uncomfortable with it, you know. So it comes down to the individual, really, you know. So the assessing emotional intelligence is really a highly sort of personal thing, but you have to be willing to go into areas or arenas where it's, you know, you may need some guidance. For example, like the model that I want you with the persona, the shadow, and the self. We all have our shadow areas, and many of our emotional responses that we don't actively should come out of our shadow areas. We have had, you say something, and there's some experience that I have had that makes me say, oh my gosh. And then you may be sitting with the same experience and say, hey, yeah, I remember that. You know, so it's highly individual, but the key to it is the origin of it, you know, where it actually came from. And that's when you may or may not need help. Okay. Thank you, Ian. All right, so we do have a couple questions, but I'm just going for two more because we are really over time. How do individuals actively build their emotional resilience?
Emotional resilience. What do you mean emotional resilience, though? How do you build emotional resilience? Let me see if I can interpret that. Emotional resilience. I'm thinking that there are certain emotions that that events or situations may trigger that you don't know how to handle, or you don't know how to manage yourself when that comes, because, like, usually when I hear that, I have to run out of the room, and this time I can't run out of the room, so what do? And you notice I clench my fist because I got to hold this in, and then I'm talking to you, and then I'm not hearing a word you're saying because I'm so busy, kind of. And the emotional resilience I am interpreting then could be sort of, how do I still be calm while this is happening? Well, you know, what's the opposite of emotion? That's clear, logical, factual thought. The facts could trigger the emotion, but if I stay with the facts, it's like, this is just my reality, and it's a work in progress, and I begin to rationalize it for myself. Reason is what counteracts the high emotion, you know. So, and reasoning has to do
with what actually is, with the facts. So which is why, there's this program one time when it says, stick to the facts, man, just the facts. I know you feel about it, but I understand your feeling, but what are the facts to trigger this feeling? And that's where sometimes you have to take a risk and talk. Well, for a person who's in that situation, it's a risk for them. It's not a real risk. Talk to somebody about that. These are the facts of my life. And the thing about shadow areas is that we keep stuff inside of there that we really should share, but it feels as though it's so painful now. How can I bring that to the table? But once you bring it to the table in a safe arena, you can exhale. Because we spend a lot of time waiting to exhale, especially when I'm conscious of that a lot, when you're talking about emotions and emotional responses. You could actually hear some people screaming, don't ask me, don't ask me, don't ask me, don't ask me, because of the particular situations that you've been involved in. So it's not a straight up kind of question, but usually what counters high emotion is stick with the facts. That's a reality. Nothing you can do about that reality, but you can do something about your response to that reality.
Okay, thank you, Ian. And the last one. There seems to be a generational gap in approach to emotional intelligence. As a young person, it feels like expressing my feelings on a matter is seen or deemed as weak. Do you have any tips to create a space to communicate feelings to my coworkers or my boss that it would land better?
Yeah. Stand up and tell them just that. As a young person, I'm struggling with my emotions and I feel as though I can't talk to you. Why I feel that way? You want to ask that? Okay, well, I'll tell you why I feel that way and talk the truth as to how I feel about that. Is that a risk? It doesn't have to be. But once you start challenging that, especially in an open forum, people may want to respond because they'll take it personally. So maybe that calls for a quiet conversation with a team leader as to how can we address that, because this is how I feel and this is how it impacts me. And I'm not feeling sorry for myself. I'm just saying this is how I feel, this is what I see. And you can always have those truth conversations with the right kind of leadership, I guess. I say right kind of leadership to address that. There's no easy answer to that, because what I just heard is that I'm the only one sitting in the room that feels like this and all these other people feel like that, and how am I going to deal with that? Well, there's a whole proverb that says, African proverb, how do you eat an elephant? How do you eat an elephant? There you go. So where you going to bite first? And usually the place to bite, if you have a real problem here at Massy stores, and you really think it impacts everybody here, I'll come and bite you. You come and you bite this elephant, and this elephant don't bite. Then we start talking about it here. But usually the response of the person who is the proper leadership response is to take that seriously, because there is a person in here who is very uncomfortable with what's happening, and we need to talk about that. And why are we not listening to them? But then again, everybody might want to leave by 5 o'clock. That's a long conversation. But to be continued, that's a cultural thing I'm talking about. So we had these things, and are we working on this? And that doesn't take away from the actual business part of it. A lot of people feel that we spend too much time talking about emotions. We don't need emotions here. What we need is to get the job done. Well, you get the job done more effectively sometimes when people feel that they are being heard, even though they are not being agreed with, but I'm being heard, and we're having real conversations about it. It's called trust.
Ian, I think I have the last question. I'm not sure if anybody else does. I'm going to wrap it up. So I'm sitting in the front, and I'm looking at your socks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your socks have martini shakers on them.
Have what?
Martini shakers. I think there was a martini shakers and limes on your socks. Is that correct?
You want to know if I drank it?
No. We talk about stress management, right? So falling short of alcoholism, what are some simple tips that you could give us to manage stress? Because we're going into our busiest time of the year. We are all going to be stressed out. I mean, you come here with your martini socks, but we can't resort to those tactics. What are like 3 quick, easy things that maybe we could do to manage our stress well and make sure it doesn't manifest into illness and so on?
Well, the first thing you have to do is what stresses you. Admit what stresses you. You know, everybody says, well, I'm going home for Christmas, I'm going home for Christmas, but sometimes that stresses you. You know, because it's the thing to do at Christmas time, everybody goes home for Christmas, but like, sometimes I really don't want to go because Uncle Who may be there, and you know, Auntie what, you know, she don't have no more, she don't have anything in her mouth, and like, I just want to go there and to give me a present and then say, I have to go afterwards, you know. Know what stresses you out. I mean, and be truthful about that. Once you know what stresses you out, then you have to come up with strategies as to how to, and these are very real strategies as to how you're not going to let this stress you out. What has succeeded in the past? Leave early, avoid certain kinds of situations, avoid certain kinds of conversations, you know, and it has to be very conscious. And you said you wanted 3, and the third one is, I really would like to come, you know, but like, I really can't make it this year. I feel so badly. And don't go. People don't like to do that one because it's a communal thing. But if it's going to stress you out that much, then those are the kind of hard things that you got to do. Because nobody thinks that Christmas is going to stress out anybody. Christmas is not supposed to do that. I mean, you know, I could talk from a personal perspective. I mean, I come from a big family, and at Christmas time in Toronto, everybody is there, except my niece, one niece, who says that like, every time I come there, I feel so anxious when everybody's there. I don't think I'm going to, I'll send the presents, but I'm not going to come. And that doesn't mean people don't take that personally anymore. It's like, hey, you should get something for your anxiety. But anyhow, we'll miss you, but have a good time. You know, it's a highly personal decision. You don't have to, I mean, there's a culture that says this is what happens at Christmas time, but if your own resilience can't stand it, don't expose yourself to it. Sounds tough to say because it's so anti-Christmas. But if that's where you are, that doesn't mean I don't love you anymore. I just don't want to get there. Have you never felt like that? I love him still, you know, but I can't take it today. Tough decision. But the thing with my niece is everybody understands that now. And it's not about who is there. It's a very personal thing, anxiety. Yeah.
All right. So that's the show, folks. I want to thank Ian so much for coming and making the time to have a chat and conversation with us. And all the best for the season.
Yeah.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.